The Los Angeles sun hung low over Sunset Boulevard, casting long amber shadows across the sidewalk outside a private dojo that most people walked past without noticing. No sign out front, no advertisements, just a plain wooden door tucked between a record shop and a dry cleaner, easy to miss if you didn't know what you were looking for. Inside, the air smelled of sweat, polished wood, and the faint metallic tang of determination. It was early evening on a Tuesday in October 1969, and the dojo was unusually quiet. Bruce Lee moved through a form with liquid precision, his body a study in controlled power. He was 33 years old, 5'7", 140 pounds of muscle that moved like water finding its way. Downhill, each strike cut the air with a sound like silk tearing. Each pivot left no wasted motion, no unnecessary flourish. He wore simple black training pants and nothing else. His torso gleamed with the effort of the last hour. Alone in the space, he worked through variations, testing angles, exploring the geometry of combat with the focus of a mathematician solving an equation that mattered. The door opened. Bruce didn't stop immediately. He finished the sequence, brought his hands down slowly, then turned toward the entrance. Steve McQueen stood in the doorway, his presence filling the frame. At 39, he was Hollywood's biggest box office draw, the man whose name alone could greenlight a film. He wore jeans, a white t-shirt, and dark sunglasses despite the fading light. Behind him, blocking most of the remaining doorway, stood a man who made Steve look small. Marcus Webb was 6'4" and weighed over 300 pounds. His arms were thick as bridge cables, his chest barrel-wide beneath a tight black polo shirt that strained at the seams. He'd been a college linebacker, then a bouncer, then private security for the kind of people who never wanted to hear the word no. Steve had hired him 6 months ago, and Marcus had taken to the job with the quiet confidence of someone who, indeed, never met a problem his size couldn't solve. Bruce wiped his face with a towel, draped it over his shoulder, and walked toward them. His bare feet made no sound on the wooden floor. "Steve," Bruce said, his voice calm. Carrying the faint accent of someone who'd spoken Cantonese before English, he extended his hand. Steve grinned, shook it firmly. "Bruce, hope we're not interrupting." "Never." Bruce's eyes shifted to Marcus, who stood with his arms crossed, surveying the dojo like a man assessing a room for potential threats. "Your friend is welcome." Steve glanced back at Marcus, then at Bruce. "This is Marcus. My bodyguard keeps the crazy fans at bay. You know how it is." Marcus didn't extend his hand. He gave Bruce a single nod, the kind you give a parking attendant. His gaze swept over Bruce's frame, lingered on the lack of bulk, the compact build. Something moved behind his eyes. Not respect, evaluation. The kind a man makes when he's measuring someone and finding them wanting. Bruce saw it. He always saw it. "Marcus has been asking about you," Steve said, and there was something in his tone. Not quite amusement, not quite warning. Wanted to see what all the fuss was about. Marcus finally spoke. His voice was deep, resonant, the kind that vibrated in your chest. "I've heard a lot of talk. People say you're fast. People say you're revolutionary." He paused, let the words hang. "But talk is cheap. Size matters in a real fight, and always has, always will." The dojo seemed to hold its breath. Bruce didn't react immediately. He looked at Marcus the way a teacher might look at a student who just said something confidently wrong. Not angry, not offended, just aware. Aware that teaching was about to begin. "You've been in fights," Bruce said. "It wasn't a question." "More than I can count," Marcus replied. "One every single one. Because of your size." "Because size is reality." Marcus shifted his weight, and the floorboards creaked beneath him. "I've seen small guys with technique, fast hands, good footwork. Doesn't matter when a big man gets hold of them. Physics doesn't lie." Steve looked between them, and for a moment something flickered across his face. Uncertainty. He brought Marcus here, but now the energy in the room felt charged, unpredictable. Bruce nodded slowly, as if considering this. "Physics doesn't lie," he agreed, "but people misunderstand what physics means." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I understand just fine. Weight, mass, momentum. I've got 200 pounds on you. That's not philosophy, that's fact." "It is," Bruce said. "But do you know what happens when force meets precision? When mass moves against leverage? When confidence faces awareness?" Marcus's expression hardened. "I know what happens when big hands close around a small neck." The room went very still. Steve stepped forward slightly. "Marcus, come on, man." But Marcus wasn't finished. He looked at Bruce with something that wasn't quite contempt but was close. "I respect what you do, the movies, the teaching, but let's be real. In a real fight against someone my size, you'd need more than flashy moves and quick feet. You'd need a weapon or a miracle." Bruce's face remained calm, but something shifted in his eyes. A decision made. A path chosen. "Show me," Bruce said quietly. Marcus blinked. What? Show me. Prove your point. Bruce gestured to the open space in the center of the dojo. You believe size is destiny, I believe skill is freedom. Let's find out who understands physics better. Steve's eyebrows shot up. Bruce, that's not necessary. It's necessary, Bruce said, still looking at Marcus, because Marcus needs to understand something before he walks out of here, and I need to show him. Marcus stared at Bruce for a long moment. Then he smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was the smile of someone who just got permission to do something he'd been wanting to do. You sure about this? Completely. No rules. One rule, Bruce said. If you tap out or say stop, it ends immediately. Marcus chuckled, a low rumbling sound. I've never tapped out in my life. Good, Bruce said. Then this will be educational. They moved to the center of the dojo. Marcus rolled his shoulders, loosened his neck. The motion was casual, unbothered. He'd done this 100 times, always with the same result. He outweighed Bruce by more than 160 pounds. Reach, strength, mass, every physical advantage was his. Steve stepped back against the wall, removed his sunglasses. His face was unreadable now, but his eyes were sharp, watchful. Bruce stood completely still, arms relaxed at his sides. His breathing was even controlled. He looked small in the space, dwarfed by Marcus's bulk, but something about his stillness had weight, presence. Marcus moved first. He came forward fast for a big man, surprisingly quick closing distance with the confidence of someone who knew that once he got his hands on you, it was over. His arms reached out, aiming to grab to control, to use all that mass to pin and crush. Bruce moved, not backward, sideways. A minimal shift, maybe 6 inches, but it took him completely out of the line of attack. Marcus' hands closed on empty air where Bruce's shoulders had been a fraction of a second before. Before Marcus could adjust, Bruce's hand shot forward. Not a punch. Something sharper, more focused. 2 knuckles extended, driving into the nerve cluster just below Marcus's ribs. The impact made a sound like a stick hitting leather. Marcus grunted, stumbled, but didn't fall. He whirled, faster than Steve expected, arms swinging in a wide arc meant to catch Bruce anywhere it landed. Bruce ducked under it, not just with his head but with his whole body, dropping into a stance so low it seemed to defy balance. Marcus's arms sailed overhead, and in that moment of overextension, Bruce rose like a spring releasing. His elbow drove upward into Marcus's solar plexus. The air left Marcus's lungs in a single explosive gasp. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened but no sound came out except a thin wheeze. Bruce was already moving again, circling, positioning. Marcus tried to reset, to recover, but his diaphragm had seized. He couldn't breathe properly. Panic flickered across his face, primal, involuntary. He swung wildly, desperately, trying to connect with anything. Bruce sidestepped, and as Marcus' momentum carried him forward, Bruce's foot swept out with surgical precision. It hooked behind Marcus's ankle and pulled. Combined with Marcus's own forward motion, it was just enough. The big man's balance broke. He tilted, tried to catch himself, but his body was moving wrong, weight distributed wrong. He went down hard. The impact shook the floor. Dust motes exploded into the air, caught in the slanted evening light. Marcus landed on his side, one massive arm thrown out to break the fall. 12 seconds had passed since Marcus made his first move. Marcus lay there, chest heaving, trying to pull air back into his lungs. His face was red, veins standing out on his neck. He started to push himself up, but Bruce was already there, kneeling beside him, one hand on Marcus's shoulder. Not restraining, just breathe, Bruce said softly. Slow in through the nose. Marcus's eyes met Bruce's, and what Steve saw in them made something twist in his chest. Not anger now, not pride, fear, confusion. The expression of someone whose entire understanding of reality just shattered. Bruce helped him sit up, supported his back while Marcus's breathing gradually steadied. The fight was over. Had been over the moment it started, though Marcus was only now realizing it. You're strong, Bruce said, and there was no mockery in it. Genuinely strong. But strength without awareness is just weight. You move like you expect the world to yield because it always has. That expectation makes you predictable. Marcus couldn't speak yet. His lungs still burned, but he listened. You think size is your advantage, Bruce continued, but every advantage creates a disadvantage. Your mass requires commitment when you move, more momentum to control, more energy to redirect. I don't need to overpower you, I need to understand you. Steve stood against the wall, motionless. He'd seen Bruce move before, had trained with him, but this was different. This wasn't timed demonstration. This was truth delivered with precision. And the truth was devastating. Bruce stood, extended his hand down to Marcus. Marcus stared at it for a long moment. Then slowly, he reached up and took it. Bruce pulled and with surprising ease given the weight difference, helped Marcus to his feet. Marcus stood unsteadily. His face had gone from red to pale. He touched his ribs where Bruce had struck, winced. That will be tender for a few days, Bruce said. Ice tonight, heat tomorrow. Marcus looked at Bruce, and when he spoke, his voice was hoarse. I thought I've always been the biggest, always been the one people were afraid of. And that became your identity, Bruce said. But identity is a cage. You are more than your size. You've just never needed to find out what that more is. Something broke in Marcus's expression. Not physically, emotionally. His jaw worked soundlessly for a moment, and his eyes grew bright. He looked away, toward the wall, blinking rapidly. I've spent my whole life, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper, making people feel small, because it made me feel big. Bruce nodded. And now you understand what that feels like from the other side. Marcus's shoulders began to shake. He tried to stop it, visibly tried to clamp down on the emotion, but it came anyway. A sob broke from his chest, raw and unexpected. His massive hands came up to cover his face. I'm sorry, he choked out. I'm sorry. I don't know how to be anything else. Bruce stepped closer. He put his hand on Marcus's arm, that enormous arm that minutes ago had been swinging to hurt him. You can learn. If you want to, but first you have to stop seeing the world as strong versus weak, big versus small. Those are just stories we tell ourselves to avoid growing. Marcus lowered his hands, tears tracked down his face, and he didn't bother to hide them anymore. I disrespected you before I even met you, because you didn't look like what I thought strength looked like. I know. How are you not angry? Bruce smiled, and it was gentle. Because anger is easy, teaching is hard, breaking you would take 3 seconds, building you back up, that takes some. Steve watched this exchange, and something in his chest felt tight. He'd hired Marcus for his size, his presence, the way his shadow kept unwanted attention at bay. But he'd never asked what that size cost Marcus. What it did to him year after year, to be valued only for his ability to intimidate. Marcus wiped his face with the back of his hand, a gesture so vulnerable it seemed impossible coming from someone his size. What do I do now? You choose, Bruce said. Keep being what people hired you to be, or become something you choose for yourself. I don't know how to do that. Then learn. Bruce gestured around the dojo. This is where people come when they're ready to discover what they're capable of beyond what they've always been. Marcus looked around the space as if seeing it for the first time. The worn wooden floor, the simple equipment, the absence of mirrors, which meant you had to learn to feel your body rather than watch it. Steve finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried. Marcus, give us a minute. Marcus looked at Steve, then at Bruce. He nodded, moved toward the door with the careful steps of someone whose entire equilibrium had been disrupted. He paused at the threshold, turned back. Thank you, he said to Bruce, for not destroying me when you could have. Destroying is easy, Bruce said again. Anyone can do it. What matters is what you build. Marcus left, the door closing softly behind him. Steve and Bruce stood in the silence that followed. The evening light had deepened to near darkness outside, and the dojo felt suspended in time. I need to let him go, Steve said. Bruce tilted his head slightly. Why? Because he came into your space with disrespect. Because he challenged you based on ignorance. Because you're embarrassed, Bruce finished. Steve's jaw tightened. Maybe. Don't fire him because of your embarrassment, Bruce said. Fire him if he can't grow. But what I saw just now wasn't a man incapable of growth. I saw a man whose foundation cracked. And that's where real growth starts. He dismissed you, dismissed everything you represent, and then he felt what that dismissal cost. That's more valuable than any apology. Bruce walked to a small bench, picked up a water bottle, drank. Steve, you hire people to protect your body, but who protects their spirit? Who teaches them that their value isn't just their utility? Steve ran a hand through his hair. I pay him to be a wall between me and problems. That's the job. Is it? Or is that just the easiest definition? They stood in silence. Finally, Steve said, what would you do? I would ask myself what I want to leave behind. Do I want to be the man who discarded someone the moment they revealed they were human? Or do I want to be the man who saw potential beyond the mistake? Steve looked at the floor where Marcus had fallen, where 12 seconds had unmade an entire worldview. He'll never respect me again, Steve said quietly. He'll always remember he embarrassed me here. No, Bruce said. He'll remember you gave him the chance to be more than what he was. That's different than respect. That's gratitude. And gratitude builds loyalty that fear never can. Steve pulled his sunglasses from his pocket, turned them over in his hands. You made it look effortless. It wasn't. It was 40 years of training, failure, adjustment, growth, and what looks like effortless is just invisible effort. Bruce smiled slightly. And Marcus is right about one thing. In a street fight where I make mistakes, his size is a serious advantage, but fights aren't won by advantages. They're won by awareness. And awareness can be taught. You'd teach him if he wants to learn, yes, but he can learn if he's back to working. Security, building walls around himself and others. He needs to be somewhere that asks him to become something new. Steve nodded slowly, turned toward the door, stopped. Why did you agree to the challenge? Steve asked. You didn't have to, because he needed to experience what he'd been doing to others his whole life. Not through talking, through feeling. And because the kindest thing you can do for someone is show them their cage, then hand them the key. Steve stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the darkening street outside. I'm letting him go tomorrow. Bruce didn't respond, but I'm going to make sure he knows it's not punishment, it's opportunity. Then you understand, Bruce said. Steve left. Bruce stood alone in the dojo as night settled fully outside. He moved back to the center of the floor, to the space where Marcus had fallen, where 12 seconds had delivered a lesson that words could never accomplish. He thought about size, about the stories people tell themselves, about how everyone is trapped by the very thing they think gives them power. Marcus was trapped by his size, Steve was trapped by his fame, everyone walking around with cages they'd built themselves, thinking they were kingdoms. Bruce began to move through another form, slower this time, meditative. Each movement was an exploration of balance, of how power flows through yielding rather than forcing, through understanding rather than imposing. The next morning, Steve McQueen called Marcus Webb into his office in Malibu. The ocean was visible through floor-to-ceiling windows, waves rolling in with patient regularity. I'm letting you go, Steve said without preamble. Marcus had expected this. He nodded, said nothing. But not because you embarrassed me, because you need something I can't give you. And I'd be a selfish bastard if I kept you from finding it. Marcus looked up, confused. Steve slid an envelope across the desk. 2 months severance, and Bruce Lee's number. He said if you call, he'll train you. No charge, but you have to want it. Actually want it, not for a job for yourself. Marcus stared at the envelope. I don't understand. You spent your whole life being hired for your size. What if someone wanted to know you beyond that? What if someone saw something worth developing that had nothing to do with how much you weigh? Marcus's throat worked. Why are you doing this? Because yesterday I watched a man 160 pounds lighter than you teach you more in 12 seconds than anyone ever has. And I realized that I've been using you the same way everyone else has. As a tool, not as a person. I am a tool, Marcus said quietly. That's all I know how to be. Then learn to be something else. Bruce is offering you that chance. Don't waste it. Marcus took the envelope with shaking hands. What if I fail? Then you fail knowing you tried to be more than what everyone told you that you had to be. That's not failure. That's courage. 3 weeks later, Marcus Webb walked back through the door of Bruce Lee's dojo. This time he came alone, wearing workout clothes, carrying nothing but uncertainty and a willingness that felt fragile as glass. Bruce was there, working through forms. He stopped when Marcus entered, smiled. You came, Bruce said. I don't know what I'm doing here, Marcus admitted. Perfect. That's where everyone should start. They trained, not fighting, not techniques, just breathing, just standing, learning to feel the body as something other than a weapon or a wall, learning to move with intention instead of momentum. Marcus struggled. Everything felt wrong, unnatural. His size, which had always been his answer, now felt like a question he didn't know how to ask. Bruce was patient, endlessly patient. He adjusted Marcus's stance millimeter by millimeter, spoke about breath, about center, about the difference between tension and power. You're trying to shrink yourself, Bruce observed one day, 3 months in, to make yourself smaller because you think that's what I want. But that's still the same trap. I don't want you smaller, I want you free. Marcus stopped moving, stood there breathing hard. I don't know what that means. It means stop defining yourself by size at all. Big, small, it's the same cage, just different bars. Something clicked, not intellectually, deeper in the body, in the place where understanding lives before it becomes words. Marcus began to cry again, but it was different this time. Not shame, release. Let it out, Bruce said quietly. You've been carrying that weight longer than any muscle can bear. The years that followed were not easy for Marcus Webb. He left security work entirely, enrolled in community college, studied kinesiology and physical therapy. He trained at Bruce's dojo 3 times a week. And slowly, painfully slowly, learned to inhabit his body as something other than a threat or a shield. He learned that strength could be gentle, that size could serve instead of dominate, that his presence could make people feel safe rather than afraid. When Bruce Lee died in 1973, Marcus was one of the pallbearers. He carried his teacher's body with tears streaming down his face, grateful for every difficult, transformative moment they'd shared. Steve McQueen attended the funeral. He and Marcus spoke briefly, two men bound by a moment in a dojo when the world pivoted for both of them. "You did the right thing," Marcus said, letting me go. "Bruce did the right thing," Steve corrected. "I just got out of the way." Marcus became a physical therapist specializing in helping athletes transition out of sports, helping them discover identity beyond physical performance. He understood their struggle intimately, the terror of being valued only for the body and the freedom of learning. You are more. He never forgot the 12 seconds that changed everything. The moment when his cage broke open and someone offered him a key instead of another lock. He taught his clients what Bruce taught him, that the strongest thing you can do is choose to grow. That power without awareness is just weight. That the person who can make you feel small has also given you the chance to become large in ways that matter. Steve McQueen never hired another bodyguard of Marcus' size. He chose differently after that day, looking for people who understood protection as something more nuanced than intimidation. Years later, when asked about Bruce Lee in interviews, Steve would grow quiet, thoughtful. "He was the only person I ever met," Steve said once, "who could destroy someone and build them back up in the same breath. Most people choose one or the other. Bruce chose both. That's why he mattered." Now ask yourself something. Who in your life have you dismissed because they didn't look like your idea of strength, intelligence, or capability? Who have you underestimated because your assumptions felt safer than curiosity? When was the last time you were wrong about someone, and what did you do when you realized it? Did you double down on your judgment, protect your ego, retreat behind excuses? Or did you acknowledge your blindness and grow? Think about the people you've written off, the ones you've categorized and filed away as irrelevant, incapable, unworthy of your attention or respect. What if you're wrong? What if your dismissal says more about your limitations than theirs? What if the person you're certain couldn't teach you anything is actually the one you need to learn from most? Bruce Lee understood something most people never grasp, that teaching someone requires breaking their certainty without breaking their spirit. That the goal isn't to humiliate, but to illuminate. That 12 seconds of truth can accomplish what 12 years of talking never could. He chose to show Marcus his cage and hand him the key. He could have simply destroyed him, proven his point, walked away feeling vindicated. But destruction is easy, building is hard, teaching is harder, and giving someone the tools to dismantle their own limitations and reconstruct themselves into something freer, stronger, more aware. That's the rarest gift one human can offer another. Marcus Webb walked into that dojo a man trapped by his size, defined by his mass, limited by his assumptions. He walked out a man on the path to freedom, not because Bruce Lee was fast, though he was. Not because Bruce Lee was skilled, though he was that too. But because Bruce Lee understood that real strength isn't demonstrated by how completely you can defeat someone, it's demonstrated by how fully you can help them become who they're meant to be. That's the lesson Steve McQueen learned when he fired his bodyguard the next day. Not as punishment, as liberation. What will you do with the people you've underestimated? Will you hold them in the cage of your assumptions, or will you hand them the key? The choice, like all meaningful choices, is yours. But know that the choice you make reveals everything about who you are when you have the power to define someone else's worth. Bruce Lee chose teaching. Steve McQueen chose grace. Marcus Webb chose growth. What will you choose?